Greetings, everyone, and welcome to The Cause. My name is Rob, and today we're going to be discussing the fifth book in our 8-book reading series, which is The Abolition of Man by Clive Staples Lewis. This is a great book. It's probably going to go down as one of my favorite books that I've done on this channel so far. Some may find it difficult to read because of its style. In my opinion, it's easier to wrap my head around the concepts in Plato's Republic than the ones I find in The Abolition of Man. For this reason, I really want to take my time and think through this book with you. I'm not an expert. I'm not a teacher or a professor, so these are just my ideas and my personal takeaways from my reading. So let's discuss the background of the book and briefly get to know C.S. Lewis, and then we will move into the concepts in this book. So let's begin. To truly appreciate some books, it is important to know a little about the author and the time period in which the books are written. The Abolition of Man was a series of lectures Lewis gave over the radio in 1943. World War II was in full swing. The surrender of the Axis powers in North Africa, the invasion of Sicily, and the Battle of Stalingrad. It was an eventful year, to say the least. Lewis would be living in Oxford at the time because, well, he worked at Oxford. And now there are not too many people that understand languages like Lewis did. He was proficient in Greek, Latin, French, German, and Italian, and he could read Old English, Icelandic, and even Old Norse. And he wielded this weapon of language throughout all types of books: theology, philosophy, children's fantasy, history, and others. So what you will find in his books are very precisely chosen words to hammer home well thought out ideas. He can get wordy, but every word he uses is chosen very carefully. This is an area where I personally struggle. Words and their meaning mattered very deeply to Lewis. So, that being said, let's move into the book.
Maybe you got lost somewhere, swimming too far off the beach, off the coastline.
The book is broken up into 3 main sections. The first section is Men Without Chests, and that is where we will begin our journey. Lewis opens the book in almost an annoyed manner. There is this book that he calls the Green Book, that he obliterates in the first section of his book. This was a real book, and it was ironically called The Control of Language, and it was written by Alex Keene and Martin Ketley. The irony of its name is just too good not to mention. He makes it clear his disagreement is not about what the authors are trying to accomplish in the book, but more so with the unintended consequences and the damaging effects of what they are unintentionally teaching. The first example is the author's use of the word sublime as a description of a waterfall in a quote. Is the waterfall actually sublime in and of itself, or is it just your feelings that make it so? Is the beauty of the waterfall a fact, or is it subjective to the view of the individual? Do your feelings about the waterfall override the objective truth of its sublimeness? If you walk away from the waterfall, is it no longer sublime? This mentality diminishes the value of the object or the subject. Does the word sublime have intrinsic value, or is it just an emotion projected onto an experience? Now, this seems petty at first until he dives deeper into his argument. First, we need to understand that a predicate of value is the statement the waterfall is sublime. Lewis states there are 2 propositions the student will be left with. Firstly, that all sentences containing a predicate of value are statements about the emotional state of the speaker. And secondly, that all such statements are unimportant. Once you say that something is not an objective truth, and you diminish the value to an emotional state, it becomes an opinion. To each his own. I mean, you are entitled to your own opinion. When a student reads or hears something like this, he or she may start to assume that we can assign emotional value to everything which has intrinsic value. Let me just say that intrinsic value is something that holds value on its own. It does not need your emotional state to give it value. You can be dead and a waterfall is still sublime. You do not need emotion or custom to make it so. If we start to assume that our emotions dictate the value of something, then Lewis states it is subjective and therefore trivial. Lewis states, in regards to the student, it is not a theory they put into his mind, but an assumption, which 10 years hence, its origin forgotten, and its presence unconscious, will condition him to take one side in a controversy which he has never recognized as a controversy at all. Think about that. It is the butterfly effect in words. Something gets stomped out or planted in your youth, and it changes how you view the world for the rest of your life. Another little portion of human heritage has been quietly taken from them before they were old enough to understand. Now, he makes it clear in the book that he is assuming that this is not occurring on purpose, and that these leaders and educators are not doing this with a motive. But, if there is a motive, then the goal can only be one thing. The trousered ape and the urban blockhead may be precisely the kind of man they really wish to produce. So, if they're planning on making a clean sweep of traditional values in a grammar book, then Lewis says it is no longer just a grammar book. This is a book of philosophy and psychology, disguised as an English grammar book. One of the main issues Lewis has with this is the suppression of emotions, or fortifying the student's mind against emotion. His issue is this: by starving the sensibility of our pupils, we only make them easier prey to the propagandist when he comes. No matter what side of the political spectrum we take arms up to defend, we can all see the power of propaganda. It will always be in the minds of those who have power to make their subjects as impressionable as possible. At this point, we move into a concept that he will refer back to throughout the rest of the book. If you miss what he means by the Tao, at this point, it will make the remainder of the book impossible to understand. Lewis takes the golden rule, basically, from many different parts of the world. Do unto others as you would have them do unto you. Do no harm. Harmony with nature is prized, creating men with gentle heart who can discern. The Tao is the way or the path in Chinese, and it is summed up by how we should morally conduct ourselves. Lewis, in a way, says that religion is like the language that has been created to explain this universal truth of morality, objective morality. He further clarifies it here. It is the doctrine of objective value, the belief that certain attitudes are really true and others are really false, to the kind of things the universe is and the kind of things we are. This is why emotional states can be in harmony with reason or out of harmony with reason. Lewis says, no emotion in itself is a judgment. Emotions either conform to reason or they don't. The heart never takes the place of the head, but it can and should obey it. To obey anything, we kind of have to be taught something about it. Lewis moves into the next section. Teaching the next generation to live within the moral parameters of the Tao is important. But what if not everyone believes in the Tao? The problem lies here. Hence, the educational problem is wholly different according as you stand within or without the Tao. For those within, the task is to train in the pupil those responses which are in themselves appropriate, whether anyone is making them or not, and in making which the very nature of man consists. Those without, if they are logical, must regard all sentiments as equally non-rational, as mere mists between us and the real objectives. As a result, they must either decide to remove all sentiments as far as possible from the pupil's mind, or else to encourage some sentiments for reasons that have nothing to do with their intrinsic justness or ordinancy. The latter courses involve them in the questionable process of creating in others by suggestion or incantation a mirage which their own reason has successfully dissipated. He's basically saying that you can't have your cake and eat it too. You can't have two incompatible things. Either you accept the Tao in its entirety, or you remove pieces from it like Jenga blocks. The more pieces that are removed, the more fragile the Tao gets. The erosion of time will collapse this moral structure. Children become extremely important in this case. He mentions an example with birds. The old birds would train their baby birds to fly and become actually birds. The new system is like the poultry keeper. He raises the birds not to fly, but for his own purpose. Think about that. In a word, the old was kind of propagation, men transmitting manhood to men. The new is merely propaganda. All right, we're about to move a little deeper into this conversation, so please stay with me. Lewis states, no justification of virtue will enable a man to be virtuous. Without the aid of trained emotions, the intellect is powerless against the animal organism. Think about that. We're no longer trained up in virtues and wonder why we have misplaced them as a society. We are governed by our animal minds instead of the moral mind of man. He goes on, and remember here that C.S. Lewis saw action on the front lines in World War I, in the trenches, and he was actually wounded. So he's not just talking academically at this point, he's speaking from worldly experience. He says, "In the battle, it is not syllogisms that will keep the reluctant nerves and muscles to their post in the third hour of the bombardment. The crudest sentimentalism, such as Gaius and Titius would wince at, about a flag or a country or a regiment, will be of more use. We were told it all long ago by Plato. As the king governs by his executive, so reason in man must rule the mere appetites by means of the spirited element. The head rules the belly through the chest. Reason, which is the head, should guide emotions and desires, which is the belly, through trained sentiments and moral values, which is the chest. Men with a generous chest are the indispensable liaison officers between the cerebral man and the visceral man, the link between man's intellect and man's emotion. The focus is the mean or the middle of these two forms of man." And let me just say that when Lewis says man, he is speaking of humans, all of us, so women included. Just want to clarify that. So Lewis states in regards to the mean between the visceral man and the cerebral man, "It may even be said that it is by the middle element that man is man, for by his intellect he is mere spirit, and by his appetite mere animal." The operation of the Green Book and its kind is to produce what may be called men without chests, men without morals, men without virtue, and men who do not respect honor. Men are no smarter today, but Lewis says it is the atrophy of the chest that makes them appear so. We clamor for the qualities we are rendering impossible. We may desire creativity, self-discipline, drive, but Lewis says this: in a sort of ghastly simplicity, we remove the organ and demand the function. We make men without chest and expect of them virtue and enterprise. We laugh at honor and are shocked to find traitors in our midst. We castrate and bid the gelding be fruitful. You can't cut the nuts off of a stallion and expect him to produce offspring. You can't remove the emotion and expect compassion. We then move into part 2, which is the way. The practical result of education, in the spirit of the Green Book, must be the destruction of the society which accepts it. The key word is accepts. If society rejects this form of conditioning, then we may still have a chance. The only problem now is 80 plus years after this book was written, the acceptance has already been rooted in to our society. It is no longer so much about accepting as it would be rooting out. Lewis was warning that the weeds were going to be popping up in the garden. Now we are that future garden, completely overrun by the weeds. So what is the purpose of a book like the Green Book? Lewis states, and this is good, they write in order to produce certain states of mind in the rising generation, if not because they think those states of mind intrinsically just or good, yet certainly because they think them to be the means to some state or society which they regard as desirable. You might want to pause and think on that one. He further states, for the whole purpose of their book is so to condition the young reader that he will share their approval. This is why we fear any political party, leader, organization, or institution meddling in our education system. The focus is no longer on the desires and the well-being of the student, but the desire of the society the student will one day work in. Getting them to approve of the new ways of living is crucial. You're not changing grandpa's mind, but his grandkids, they're up for grabs. They claim to be cutting away the parasitic growth of emotion, religious sanction, and inherited taboos in order that real or basic values may emerge. The question is, what happens once this scenario plays out? Even the ones doing the cutting will not benefit from it. Lewis brings up a word that I feel is blamed a lot and misused, and it is the word instinct. He defines it to mean an unreflective or spontaneous impulse widely felt by the members of a given species. But how does instinct help you find value? Sometimes virtues, such as courage, go against instinct. The instinct may be to run from the enemy, retreat, quit the field. If we live our lives on instinct alone, then we are nothing more than beasts of burden. Beyond instinct is choice and reflection. My instinct is to run, but my duty is to stand fast. I can choose that. Hold the line. The instinct to pursue women outside of your marriage, eat far too much, and lie to get out of trouble. We can blame it all on instinct, but as humans we can choose to oppose that instinct and cultivate virtues. So do you value a prosperous society? Do you want to live in a civilization that values the moral and virtues wrapped up in the Tao. Lewis says, all the practical principles behind the innovator's case for posterity or society or the species are there from time immemorial in the Tao, but they are nowhere else. Unless you accept these without question as being to the world of action what axioms are to the world of theory, you can have no practical principles whatever. You cannot reach them as conclusions. They are premises. He goes on to say that if nothing is self-evident, then nothing can be proved. And if the Tao falls, all of its conceptions of value fall with it. It is all or none, and you cannot pick and choose. It is the sole source of all value judgments, and if it is rejected, all value is rejected. But surely we can invent something better, right? I mean, this Christian, Buddhist Tao stuff is outdated and it should be replaced, exchanged for something more modern and inclusive, or even exclusive. Lewis says, the human mind has no more power of inventing a new value than of imagining a new primary color, or indeed of creating a new sun and a new sky for it to move in. So let's just say the Tao is objectively real. We must assume if that is the case, then we cannot change it, invent something new, or replace it without destroying ourselves in the process. You can only accept Nietzschean ethics if you are ready to scrap traditional morals. And Lewis claims something next that I believe is very important. Aristotle said that only those who have been well brought up can usefully study ethics. To the corrupted man, the man who stands outside the Tao, the very starting point of this science is invisible. He may be hostile, but he cannot be critical. He does not know what it is being discussed. I want to move this point a little further. Not just the man who is well brought up, but the man who is well experienced. There is a problem that I have noticed in the philosophy and engineering fields and many others, where they have studied the material and understand the theories so well, but they do not have a clue about the application. It is the engineer who designs a product he has never worked on or seen in operation. It's the philosophy student who debates life and has never put his life on the line. It would be like Lewis discussing the feeling of life in the trenches during World War I without ever experiencing the hell within the trench. For concepts like the Tao, to make sense, you must pick up the cross, experience the world, embody your role in society, and only then can you remotely be critical of it. But we accept the criticism of those who have just read but never lived, and we fear the judgments and accusations of the inexperienced. Do the men who invaded Normandy care about the protesters back home? When Jesus bore the cross, did he care about the jeers of the Pharisees? When Socrates was on trial, did he care what the sophists were demanding? When Martin Luther King was boycotting, was he concerned about the approval of the racist? We care nowadays about the opinions of those who value things we care not for, who have never experienced a world in which they are not willing to understand. I digress, and sorry to rant, getting a little off topic here, but anyway. We sat around and we allowed traditional values to be debunked based on the claim that something better would be discovered and found later down the road. But Lewis says, this is the rejection of the concept of value altogether. And this brings us to the final lecture, Part 3, Men Without Chess. In Part 3, Lewis starts out describing and kind of defining man's conquest over nature, from harnessing wind to the development of nuclear weapons being developed as he was doing this work. He also makes it clear that all our progress is not bad. He's not saying we should stop progress or end our quest to better our species, but there are casualties of progress and errors during change. One issue he brings up is the conquest over nature is not held by everyone equally. He says, what we call man's power over nature turns out to be a power exercised by some men over other men with nature as its instrument. I brought up atomic energy earlier because a certain group of people have control over it, but I, as an individual, do not have much control over it at all. I may benefit from cheaper electricity, but I personally have no control over the use and the power of which it contains. Man's power over nature is like most things in life. It is controlled by a select few in the hierarchy. Now, everything we have discussed prior to this becomes very, very important. Because if we condition a generation who is incapable of handling what has been left in their control to manage, things can go boom, boom really quickly. He says, each generation exercises power over its successors, and each insofar as it modifies the environment bequeathed to it and rebels against tradition, resists and limits the power of its predecessors. This modifies the picture which is sometimes painted of a progressive emancipation from tradition and a progressive control of natural processes resulting in a continual increase of human power. In reality, of course, if any one age really attains, by eugenics and scientific education, the power to make its descendants what it pleases, all men who live after it are the patients of that power. The concepts and ability of changing the future generations, thought process, values, and beliefs is so powerful, and the consequences can be devastating. Who truly has the audacity and the ego large enough to think they know what is best for all the future generations to come? To think you can change things to something so much better than what we have inherited through tradition and culture is an arrogance I can't quite wrap my head around. It is no irony that a few decades after Nietzsche and Marx, we have back-to-back world wars. I'm not saying they were directly responsible, but the fruits of their labors are visible, at least very much so in the second one. How the world values things are so fragile, and just a spark, a single change, or even just accepting a lie can alter what we value in future generations to come. Lewis then explains how master conditioners will eventually rule. Remember, man's conquest of nature will not be evenly distributed. The conditioners doing the conditioning will understand this power, and you will not realize it until you eventually live extremely different than those of the past. If we become accustomed to liking what others say we should like, approving of what others say we should approve of, and we mindlessly continue to follow a crowd that swears they are progressing us to some greater good, well, let me just share his words here. Man's conquest of nature, if the dreams of some scientific planners are realized, means the rule of a few hundreds of men over billions upon billions of men. There neither is nor can be any simple increase of power on man's side. Each new power won by man is a power over man as well. Protecting humanity from humans is our single biggest struggle going forward. It is the struggle to uphold values and tradition versus tear it down and build something that suits the generation of now, suits the generation of me, myself and I, the ego, the selfie-posting generation that demands they notice me. Lewis explains it beautifully in the book that when you are handed down the teachings of the Golden Rule or the Tao, it is an inheritance that should be valued. We have spent more than 2,000 years pondering and molding these ideas and traditions to our culture. The ego, to remove it because someone wants to condition a new generation to think differently, can pose a huge problem, as Lewis mentions here. Values are now mere natural phenomena. Judgments of value are to be produced in the pupil as part of the conditioning. Whatever Tao there is will be the product, not the motive of education. Once human nature has surrendered its power to the conditioner, the conditioning is in full effect. He says, the conditioners, then, are to choose what kind of artificial Tao they will, for their own good reasons, produce in the human race. Are we here now? Has the traditional family emaciated away from the disease brought on by conditioning? Or is it just the natural cycle civilizations go through with declining birth rates? Regardless, the Tao can be altered by the conditioners, and you may get to a point where you own nothing and you find that you're pretty happy. And for those of us who still value tradition, morals, and ownership, we cannot allow the conditioners to erase our history, our culture, and our traditions. We cannot let society lower the standards to a level in which we lose our true sense of identity. In doing so, we lose truth and honesty. We lose beauty, and down the drain goes respect, and following closely behind, justice. No one will want to experience this world age with justice and law removed. I won't elaborate on the weapons the elite have at their arsenal to control us nowadays. I think 2020 was proof enough for most of us. The question comes up in the book, why we should suppose that these will be bad men. Lewis makes the point that he's not asking if they are good or bad. He's actually asking if they will even be men at all. Lewis states, it is not that they are bad men. They are not men at all. Stepping outside the Tao, they have stepped into the void. Nor are their subjects necessarily unhappy men. They are not men at all. They are artifacts. Man's final conquest has proved to be the abolition of man. Placing bias to the side, I think it is a question we should all ask ourselves. Is the current course of the path we are on moving in a direction which will produce the abolition of man? The fall of humanity and the reset of our moral value system may be something we see in our lifetime, if we are not careful. We need to be thinking all of this through before mindlessly accepting change which is said to be good for us. Now, the scariest part of this book, at least for me, is the next part. He literally starts to describe the society in which we live today. He uses the Latin phrase, and excuse me for my lack of skill in reading Latin, sic volo, sic jubeo, which translates basically to, I will it, I insist on it. Let my will stand rather than reason. It is expressing self-asserted authority because you want something. Lewis states in a one-line sentence that sums up society today. When all that says it is good has been debunked, what says I want remains. The conditioner's own pleasure must be what motivates them then. And I love the next thought he brings up. Once the mind has been emptied of rational and spiritual motives, do we truly think benevolence can remain? If the Tao is stripped away and man steps outside traditional morality, Lewis states history does not show many examples of this power being used benevolently. He even goes as far as to say this, I am inclined to think that the conditioners will hate the conditioned. On the opposite side of love is hate, and the pendulum appears to be swinging to the side we should be opposing. As man allows its humanity to be conditioned out of existence, Lewis brings up a good point. Nature, untrammeled by values, rules the conditioners, and through them, all humanity. Man's conquest of nature turns out, in the moment of its consummation, to be nature's conquest of man. You have to catch this. Nature is not bound by values. Nature is not restricted by values. And if the conditioner removes the value, he is ruled by nature alone. We think we are conquering nature, the closest form of nature to us, which is our humanity. And in the moment we achieve this victory, nature has conquered man. What a remarkable idea. That is something to ponder on a bit. Do not read this book quick. You might miss something hidden within the pages. He then moves into the magician's bargain, which is an important concept because we must ask ourselves if we have made this bargain. It's basically, if you give up your soul, you get power in return. But once you give up your soul, your morals, your values, your Tao, the power you had no longer really belongs to you. We shall in fact be slaves and puppets of that to which we have given our souls. You slowly become the raw material that purchases things based on an advertisement that makes you feel good in the moment. We are the experiments of scientific manipulation, guinea pigs to new medicines and theories. We are mere objects that value nothing, and we consume everything. He says, the real objection is that if man chooses to treat himself as a raw material he will be. Not raw material to be manipulated, as he fondly imagined, by himself, but by mere appetite, that is, mere nature, in the person of his dehumanized conditioners. This book is deep. If you do not stop every couple pages and ponder what has become of life, then read it slower. Lewis gives us a choice in the book. We can play it safe and stick with the Tao, or we can take our chances and follow Nietzsche into the insane asylum. I'm just kidding. He didn't really say that. He did say, either we are rational spirit obliged forever to obey the absolute value of the Tao, or else we are mere nature, to be kneaded and cut into new shapes for pleasures of masters who must, by hypothesis, have no motive but their own natural impulses. You can either choose morality and virtue, or you can choose submission. There is no freedom outside the Tao. Without truth, honor, and love, there is only submission. Only the Tao provides a common law of action which encompasses the rulers as well as the ruled. A dogmatic belief in objective value is necessary to the very idea of a rule which is not tyranny or obedience, which is not slavery. We can't just go and create ideologies and expect there to be no consequences. We can easily go from killing a bad man to exterminating social groups we care not for. When we become less of what makes us human, we become more primal. We only differ from animals in the sense we live within the Tao. With so much focus on science, technology, and advancement, we forget to bring the Tao up with us. And Lewis makes it clear, he is not attacking science. Progress can be good if we progress in a way that aligns with the Tao. Lewis sums up what he is trying to say when he brings up the cardinal problem, and I would suggest marinating on these lines as well. For the wise men of old, the cardinal problem had been how to conform the soul to reality, and the solution had been knowledge, self-discipline, and virtue. For magic and applied science alike, the problem is how to subdue reality to the wishes of men. We are so focused on ourselves and how I feel, what I want, what I deserve, what I should get, that we forget that happiness is not often found in selfishness. We go on explaining everything away and poking holes into the concept of the Tao that we can't help but think it is flawed. Lewis says we will eventually explain explanation away, and at that point, the lights turn out. Your mind no longer has an identity, and the lost feeling of not knowing what is truth or good or what right or wrong is confusing, and it mentally can make living life difficult. Lewis leaves us with this. It is no use trying to see through first principles. If you see through everything, then everything is transparent. But a wholly transparent world is an invisible world. To see through all things is the same as not to see. I do not know what the solution is. My biggest fear is the warnings he provided are no longer a past man's thoughts, but our current reality. With that being said, I hope you have enjoyed my perspective on The Abolition of Man by C.S. Lewis. These are just my takeaways and interpretations, and they may be completely wrong. So pick up the book and read it for yourself. It's a marvelous book to study deeply, and please take your time with it. It's also very short. You can get through it pretty quickly. The goal is not just to read it, but to digest it within your own experiences. So good luck. Do not be discouraged with this one. It is a little hard, but it's really, really good. It's one of the best books written, in my opinion, that explains our current social climate in the world, most definitely in the Western world. So these videos are sponsored by my coffee company. If you would like to try some fresh roasted coffee, the link is always in the description below. I look forward to seeing you in the next book, which is Discourse on Voluntary Servitude, which will be coming out next. So with that being said, drink some great tasting coffee, read some inspiring books, and I will see you very, very soon. Thank you all so much for watching. I love you all, and stay blessed.
All the dreams I've locked up, I'll go and find it. It's good, good, good,